Hey everybody, welcome back to Dental Unfiltered. I'm Matt Brown. We have an awesome guest today, Justin Klingshire from McLaren and Associates. Um, you know, guys, you're in a situation right now where a lot of you guys are prepping for sale or you're thinking about sale, and the marketplace just sucks. You're out there picking through all these brokers, and it's just a crapshoot what you get. Me and Justin are going to start doing a segment together pretty regularly about what the market conditions are and what's going on. But today we want to start with how to shop. And Justin is somebody I explicitly trust. I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of practices. When someone approaches me and says, "Hey, I want to sell," the only person I refer to, because the only person I trust, is Justin. A model of integrity, a model of business ethics. He really cares. He understands that the thing you're selling is the thing that you have built your whole career as one of your big retirement tools. And when you guys are looking and shopping for a broker, remember every crown and every bad day you had and it all led up to that moment, and take the decision very seriously about who you pick. And Justin, for me, is the only option I trust with my practices that have worked hard to grow with me. So we're going to talk today about when you're shopping for a practice or when you're shopping for a broker, how should you do it? But Justin, real quick, tell us a little bit about yourself real fast.
Yeah, Matt, appreciate you having me on. Uh, but I've been in dental M&A for my entire professional career. It's been about 15 years, spent the first 10 as a banker, now partner with the firm, McLaren and Associates. And primarily what I do is help large practice owners navigate the DSO space. So I sit out of our Ohio office. We're headquartered in Texas, have an office in California, in LA, and in Atlanta.
Awesome. So you guys aren't a one man shop, which is a lot out there. A lot of times I get approached by brokers as a former office manager that is also a consultant and is brokering in some states where they don't have to be licensed. And their idea of being a broker is throwing people together and getting paid a commission, which is not totally what it is. So, first, I'm a dentist, I'm approaching the marketplace. Tell me how I should be approaching the marketplace to prepare.
Yeah, for sure. I think for one, approaching it early is very wise, right? Especially if you're a larger practice owner and you have to prep for an affiliation. But as far as like vetting brokers out there, I think that's your question more or less.
Like, how do you approach it? Like, there's all these choices I have. Where, like, how should I be looking for the right broker? What should my mindset be for, like, how do I approach the right broker? What should I be looking for in a broker?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think I would also be mindful of where your education is coming from, right? Because there's certainly biases all over the place, and people are motivated, oftentimes simply to get a transaction done, trying to get to a commission from a commission to a closing as quickly as possible. But that said, I look when it comes to evaluating like options and talking with brokers, I think for one, you have to look at like how long they've been in business, right? Have they been in business just for the last year, right? Like, what is their expertise and leadership bench look like? Two, like, do they handle both DSO and private transitions? And if so, how many do they do? And how many have they done over the years? And then I think the third thing to look at, when you're seeking the advice of a broker, I mean, ask them, are they dental exclusive or have they branched off into other verticals, right? I mean, are they sort of distracted with what private equity is doing in like the med spa or the derm or the vet space? Or are they dental exclusive and relatively committed to this space? Um, but in general, that's like sort of the reputation, right? And then you can talk through like process as far as how each one of those brokers handle things. And then obviously check references when you go work with them. And then, I think lastly, just like from a performance standpoint, understand what they were able to do for their clients in the past. And you can verify that with, of course, references that they provide.
I think for docs, part of it is like, I don't think they know what they don't know. They don't know when to start, or they don't know what the indicators are. Like, how far out should I be? When do I start looking at things? I think going back to the thing you said about, the education portion of it, I think listening to the peanut gallery is a really bad idea. You'll have friends talk to you, Doc, and they'll say, "Oh, I got a 8x or 7x or whatever on EBITDA," and we hear like the word multiple and X's and EBITDA, and then we go to talk to a broker and say, "Hey, well, my friend got 8x." Well, when did your friend get that? Was it 3 years ago when interest rates were at 2.4%? Was his practice a $1.5 million practice and you're a $3 million practice? Was it a strategic partner? Was it a private equity group? I think these are things where docs don't know, and when they're approaching the broker, I don't know if they know how to communicate where they're at, right? What key things to tell the broker, and what things to block out. I would really advise against, like, don't take what all your friends are telling you about their transactions as like the way your transaction should be, right? Like, they don't do that. They don't set that
For sure. It's
standard.
also it's establishing clarity around what these things mean. I mean, we'll have a doctor. I could tell this story 100 times, like literally. When doctors come to us, they oftentimes come to us at the request of a friend who's worked with us, and they bring us an offer. And they say, "Hey, I have a practice, collects $4 million. My EBITDA is 800, and they're offering me an 8x, 6.4 million bucks. Right? Fantastic. We gut check the valuation. Turns out their EBITDA isn't 800, it's 1.1 million, right? So the DSO is controlling the narrative around that practice's EBITDA. That is mistake like number one in that case. And that doctor isn't really receiving, an 8x. They're receiving a 6x, in fact, less than that, on 1.1 million, right? So, like, the one thing you don't want to do is get your education from a DSO because it's in their best interest to do a deal in the dark, right? So, like, taking that off the table, I wouldn't just call your local DSO. They're going to love that for the reason I just described. But call and get information from people that have been in this space and working in this space for a long time that like actually like have your interests in a way like married with theirs, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because the more it sells for, the more you make on your side, right? So the interests do a lot, right? I think the other thing to be aware of is I know I've seen a trend in this, and you probably have, of like docs getting phone calls and letters from DSOs that are local, also from like private equity groups. Like my uncle's a doc, and he gets approached all the time by PE, and it's just they want to initiate the conversation before a broker gets involved just for that reason, right? They want to like get there. It's time to the deal. It's like I want to get to the deal first before the broker gets in my way.
An off-market deal is incredibly valuable for a DSO. They have marketing machines. I mean, they have a marketing department, most of them dedicated to sourcing transactions, right? Because they can pay far less for an off-market deal than they would a competitive broker-led deal.
So when a doc goes to a broker, right, he needs to convey what's most important for him, because then the broker should guide him. Are we going to a strategic partner? Are we going to a doc to doc transaction? Or are we going to PE? Because depending on how they want to get cashed out and how much time they still want to practice, or if they want to or not, a lot of their personal needs are going to dictate which one's which. So if I'm a doc and I'm going to a broker, what information should I prioritize to communicate clearly to the broker to set the expectation of what the outcome is that I want?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd say for one, like revenue. If you're under $1.5 million in revenue, the DSO like route is likely off the table. If you're between like 1.5 and 2.5, it's on the table. Same with the private buyer route. But like, quite frankly, I think the answer to your question lies in why you're doing it in the first place. Economically, it's not as if you're going to come off like very far ahead, right? Realistically. Um, Anything above 2.5, 3 million bucks in revenue, likely it's going to make economic sense to go the DSO route, right? And again, we can come at this with a relatively unbiased perspective because we handle, all three types of transactions that you outlined, whether it's doctor to doctor, strategic DSO, or financial partner DSO, private equity firm. So I think that for one. For two, look, DSOs and strategic buyers, private equity firms, not crazy interested in Medicaid right now, Medicaid and Medi-Cal. And then lastly, from a geographical standpoint, if you are in a very rural area, right, it might be difficult to find a DSO partner. I mean, it might be difficult to find a private buyer in particular markets. But in general, DSOs like major metros. And I mean, look, you can find demand, but the buyer pool thins out the more rural you go. So I'd say those three things like revenue, payer mix, and then geography are going to determine where that conversation goes. And I guess the last one would be your ability to stay on, right? If you're looking to exit in the next like year, DSOs largely aren't going to be very interested. They're looking for a partnership. Whereas if you have some runway and you're just looking for some support, you want to take chips off the table, you want to partner to help grow the practice, you want to buy back some of your time, whatever your why is, that's when a DSO transaction begins to make a little more sense.
And what I hear you saying is, so I've watched the market the last few years, and me and you have had multiple conversations over the last few years, and I feel like 5 years ago, or later, or earlier, there was a lot of dumb PE money in the marketplace where you just duct tape six practices together, you call it a DSO, you got to hire multiple, you move out, they cut the docs loose in a year or two, and then things just crumbled. And I think you're saying like below 1.5 million, there's one smaller buyer pool. Above 2.5, there's one smaller buyer pool. There's a sweet spot in the middle, but there's also, are you in a major metro or are you rural? Well, we just really kind of narrowed down that private equity and strategic partners now, they know what they want to buy now, where they didn't know 5 years ago. And I think a lot of times docs are, well, they're just going through their career saying, well, I'm going to sell for this to a private equity group. That's my plan. And then
Right.
they're within 1 or 2 years of it, and all of a sudden the carpet's pulled out from underneath them, and it's like, no, doc, not you in South Dakota who's doing 2 million a year, who's the only dentist for 80 square miles. You're not selling to anybody. And then all of a sudden they're like, crap. So like, I think that docs have an unrealistic expectation right now of this is my exit, and they haven't talked to anybody about it yet. They've just
Yeah.
heard from their
Yeah.
friends in the industry, and then the shock happens of that's not a reality, and then they take that broker in their head and say, "Well, you're just trying to not do what I need you to do." When the reality is doc, you're not in touch with what reality is. How often do you encounter like that?
All the time. The field conditions change. And I think that's why it's important to kind of have this like reoccurring market update. I mean, look, yeah, to your point, you rewind 3, 4, 5 years ago, pretty much any asset, regardless of size, payer mix, geography, it could sell. But where it would likely land is to a buyer that had no real ability to like operate and manage, right? And what do you know? Those DSO buyers have struggled in the years after some of those acquisitions. The buyers now are much more diligent. They're much smarter. The dumb money has left the building, right? Private equity is very diligent today, whereas before, at a minimum, less so. So that said, look, like that's why being close to like, hey, what do you see going on in the marketplace? What's happening? Is now the right time? Is really, really imperative, especially if you have a practice that's collecting more than like $6 or $7 million. And the reason for that is that you do get to a revenue level, right? And we've talked about this before, where when you hit like 11, 12, $15 million in top line revenue, you start to cross that $3 million in EBITDA threshold where the strategic buyer pool really starts thinning out, right? They might not have the capital available to buy you. And by strategic buyers, I mean DSOs themselves. You might only have an ability at that point, like if you get to $15 million in top line revenue, to partner with a financial buyer or a private equity firm directly. So many doctors don't really realize this. And again, these field conditions change over the years. So timing this out, especially if you have a really large practice, is key. Because to your point, they might call me and say, hey, man, I'm ready to go, right? Just like before, I'm looking to sell to a strategic buyer. I hit 13.4 million, I have $13 million in revenue. I'm operating at about, 25% EBITDA margin. I have give or take 3.54 million bucks in EBITDA. Great. But now the buyer pool is thinned out so much so that your only buyer is a financial buyer.
And I think that's where I think docs get fixated more on like the EBITDA target than that sweet spot and the timing of that sweet spot based on when they want to exit, right? So it's like I mean, right now this is the nature of the marketplace right now. Docs are being there's so many speakers on stage right now that are just talking about growth of EBITDA and you can exit this way, and they have honestly no idea what they're saying. Like I'm in the crowd at these events, probably like you are, and these guys are like, you got to grow your EBITDA to here, and your EBITDA margin should be this, and you should, and when you get there, you can exit this way. But they're not saying that the buyer pool gets smaller and timing matters, right? It's setting a very unreal expectation for these poor docs that are trying to exit, and it's just something like I think docs have to realize, like, filter the crap, and unless it comes from a broker, and the reality is your practice is really worth nothing until you get an offer from a buyer and an LOI signed and you find out what TMV is, true market value. Honestly, evaluations are bullshit until you get an offer, right? TMV is what matters. And I think docs are kind of setting this thing of like, man, I think I'm here and I'm gonna wait. If I was a doc and I wanted to exit the next 5 years, and I in my head was like, I'm gonna go to 2 or 3 million, but I was at like 1.75. Should they contact you at that moment when they're on their way up and get guidance from you before they hit their target? The target that they got set by the media, the target that they got set that shouldn't be set yet.
So that's my yeah. That was going to be my point. Is the target actually a target? Is it just this like vanity metric that they're obsessed with? Right? Has it moved since it was set? And again, going back to like who actually set it. Um, you make a couple good points, but the one I think to really double click on is that like picture yourself, evaluate like when you're a seller, you're wearing three hats. One, the first, you are a seller, right? You're going to get a check, cash at close. It's likely going to outpace that of a private buyer deal. Two, you're a partner. You're going to enter into a partnership with this DSO. What are they going to do for you? Like, are they going to do just compliance, HR, payroll, attorney, legal and accounting? Like, those are table stakes. What else are they going to do for you? RCM, marketing, procurement, management. What, and how are they going to support you? The third, though, and this is kind of what I want to hit on, is that you're an investor, right? Like ultimately, you by holding stock in the DSO are an investor in that DSO. And to circle back to your point about like what is being preached out there, ask yourselves what the DSOs want. What are they asking for and where are their pain points? One of their pain points can be an over optimized practice. What does that mean? There's a practice that collects $3 million dollars and it's got all seven ops plumbed and equipped, no ability to expand, and it's open 6 days a week and it's open for 10 hours a day and its EBITDA margins are 35%, right? There is only one place for that practice to go post affiliation, and that's backwards, right? DSOs have to show organic same store growth. It's important to ask about that for any prospective DSO partner, but also just as importantly, it's important that you acknowledge that as a seller and you say, okay, well, how do I then present my practice to a DSO in a way that looks favorable? And what's not favorable is again exhausting and squeezing that sponge so dry that there's nothing left because DSOs are ultimately graded on their ability to improve a practice. So that was a lot there, but I just wanted to address one of the points that you had made.
Yeah, so I want to kind of put it a little simpler to the audience. Guys, the DSO buys you for growth. They don't buy you for where you're at. They buy you for growth opportunity. And Justin, I'm gonna say something, and if I'm totally off base, you can say, Matt, shut up, you're not a broker. I'll be like, okay. So, and I have no ego about this stuff. A lot of times, my clients are talking to me like, hey, I want to sell in the next couple of years, and I'm like, all right, well, you have six ops, one's not plumbed out. We're not plumbing that out. And next is we're doing 4 days a week. We're not doing 5 days a week. Don't even think about it. Just to grab the EBITDA, because what it's going to do is it's going to make you unattractive because they want to see those two opportunities as growing the practice by 25%. Right? They want to see that 25% upside. When you take the 25% upside off the table, you become less attractive. Where Doc's thinking is flawed is they think, well, if I do these two things, I can grow EBITDA this much more, and when I get my multiple, it'll grow much more. But the problem with that is you're not attractive to a buyer. Then it's like you're dating and you become too hot of a girl to date. Like you're not approachable now. Like I'm a short, fat, bald guy with one leg. I can't approach the 10 to ask her on a date, but I can approach a 6. You want to be a 6 or 7. You don't want to be a 10 because then you're unattractive because you're intimidating and there's no growth there.
You're
There's no
yeah,
improvement.
intimidating is the right word, right? I think that like there's that's funny your
I mean, that's
description,
that's the analogy. That's
but
real.
yeah, no, I get it for sure. I think that's like mostly true. Look, if is low hanging fruit, right? Like if you can open another day and you are planning on selling in 18 months, and we know we can capture revenue without really increasing fixed costs are fixed, variable costs, they're going to go up a little bit. But like if the patient demand is there, you might as well open and still leave that 6th day, right? If you're not open on Saturday. So you want to leave some meat on the bone, but where it goes really off the rails is when the EBITDA margins start creeping up close to 40%. That's when, again, it's just intimidating for a DSO because they know that they can't manage that practice any better than somebody like that person could.
When it grows to that size, the key man problem becomes a problem, right? Like you guys have to understand as you listen to me and Justin talk, there's a problem in selling any business. It's called the key man problem. And the problem with that is it's all hinged on your shoulders. And if you vanish, what happens to the practice? When a practice looks garden variety, it's an opportunity because we can remove the key man and we as a I'm gonna put my if I was a DSO or private equity group, we've had success taking garden variety practices and making them a little bit better. There's very little success in taking this Ferrari practice and making it faster. It just isn't, the room isn't there, and then it becomes scary because can anyone drive that Ferrari other than the driver? I can drive a Toyota, I can drive a Honda, I can drive a Chevy, but can I drive that Ferrari? You know what I mean? Like, can it be drove by someone other than the original driver or the race car, whatever you want to call it?
Key man risk is very real. The more unique the practice, the longer the story, the longer that person's like background impact in the community, the more risk and the honestly, the less favorable the deal. Again, like put your investor hat on. If you're that DSO, are you going to invest in a practice that if that one doctor, like something were to happen to him or her tomorrow, that practice would just tank? That's troubling, right? So key man risk is 100% a giant factor when it comes to like, evaluation and a multiple. And one of the easiest things that you can do as a doctor is just layer in an associate or two, right? That helps mitigate some of that key man risk. It is funny to that point, sometimes I'll talk with people and they're like, hey man, I've got this practice. I am a magician, right? I'm the guy that makes it run. I am the like, they'll talk to me forever about themselves, not knowing that that's actually a detriment to their practice's value, right? Because realistically, sure, it's great. I love the story, and they built an incredible business. But the less we can focus, right, on that person, and the more we can focus on that practice, the better we're going to be.
And I think what we described, and we have to wrap up here in in a couple of minutes. Is there's a lot of like docs think like the window is this big, and geographic kind of closes it, and then amount of revenue closes it, and then are you optimized completely closes it, and then if you're the key man, it like the door shuts, and the problem is all the stuff we normally said is what happens in the key man scenario. Like if you work backwards from the key man scenario, those are the conditions. Is optimized, awesome, great revenue. That usually happens in the key man scenario. And you got to make sure that you need to make sure that you're not the product. The practice is the product. And by having associates and stuff, you're not the product anymore. And you can have an awesome practice, but I think there is limited windows. I think people don't understand those limited windows.
Yeah, and look, that's not to say we have plenty of practices that are just solo providers, solo practitioners, and we get great outcomes for these guys. It's just as you look to scale, the bigger you get. If you don't have an associate there, the more risk that deal carries, right? And it's just being mindful of how you want to grow in the future. And to your point, going all the way back to it, how do you go about navigating this space? It's just educating yourself, right? If you're looking to explore the DSO market, I mean, pick up the phone, give us a call, and learn about what's happening and where and what's changed and what we think will change over the next couple of years. Because growing in that way is going to help protect what we've talked about as your most valuable asset, like likely more valuable than your home, likely more valuable than your portfolio, even.
This is their biggest equity position in life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really critical for them to understand it. I'm going to end with this, and we got to wrap it up, and you can tell people how they get in touch with you. I think a lot of times two docs go into this with from a point of view of weakness, where like they're kind of like a little bit of desperation to sell. Like I finally had it, burnt out. I want to get rid of this thing, and I think that's a really bad mentality to go into it with it. Doc, sometimes I feel like you guys put more effort into shopping the lease for your next luxury car or sports car harder than you do this. Like I'm being serious. Like I just feel like they kind of like find a broker and like they think about like a house. Let's get it on the market and see what happens. No, like you have to shop for this with more intensity than anything else you shop for. And I think if you find yourself like kind of like, well, I want to get listed with a broker and get it out there, you need to pump the brakes a little bit and say, this is my most important asset in the world, my biggest equity position. this affects my children, my grandchildren, my wife, our long term, our golden years. Like this is something that has to be taken as much as diligent as the buyers are. You need to be 10 times diligent in the way you approach this, because they're gonna eat your lunch if you give them an inch. So Justin, we have to wrap up here. How can someone get in touch with you if they want to do like a free EBITDA evaluation or something like that?
Yeah, for sure. Feel free. You can head to dentaltransitions.com, click on connect, and fill out that form. Just mention that you listen to the Dentistry Unfiltered podcast with Matt and Justin. Otherwise, I'm happy to give out my phone number just on the podcast, but it's 512-590-2923. Just shoot me a text. Happy to talk with any and everybody. Love the podcast, and I appreciate you having me on. I look forward to the next episode, man.
Yeah, we're guys, listeners, we're gonna find some frequency. I think this is a really important thing for you guys. We're gonna find some frequency for you guys to get a market update. So that'll be awesome. Thank you so much, Justin, for being here with us. Somebody I respect in the marketplace, I trust with my clients all the time. Thank you guys so much for listening, and have a great day.